Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Key Trends for Specialty Trade Contractors, Tips to Improve Project Profitability. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You have joined the presentation in listening mode using your computer speakers by default. If you have issues hearing us, please be sure to use an Ethernet connection or move to an area with stronger Wi-Fi. Shutting down other applications on your device will also open up more bandwidth. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing in the chat panel of the control panel. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will collect these and address them at the end of today's event. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. I would now like to introduce Steve Jones of Dodge Construction Network and Brian Davis of Procore. Turning over to you, Steve.
Great, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. I'm Steve Jones. I've been in the construction industry my entire career. I did 4 years in tech and 20 years in AE before that, and I've been here now at Dodge for 20 years, and I run our Industry Insights Research Group. Hopefully some of you are aware of the projects that we do. We issue these as publicly available reports. We're going to be talking about one of those today, which deals specifically with profitability issues. But these are free resources. Companies like Procore is with us here today, sponsor us to do these things. And really the whole idea is to try and determine what's really working, right? What are people doing that's generating the most value? As I say, we're going to be talking about one of these today, and joining me from Procore will be Brian Davis. Brian.
Hey, Steve. Hey, thanks for having me join you on this. And just some quick background on myself. So I currently work at Procore as a senior product marketing manager. I love construction. I grew up in construction. My dad was a contractor. And I ended up finding myself working with general contractors and trade contractors later on in life as well. And then found a passion for bringing technology solutions to these companies I worked for. And that eventually led me to work at Procore on the marketing team. So really excited to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Brian and I worked together on this project. We did a deep dive into 537 specialty trade contractors. So we had responded to the survey. We had 5 different types of those trades. You see them there. And this report covers lots of topics. It dives into profitability, workforce, and technology. Today, we're really going to focus just on that profitability aspect of it. So let me take you through some of the topics we'll hit today. We learned about where all those people are in terms of their current profit margins. What is it that's eroding those margins during construction? How nasty is rework in terms of impacting that? How about changes that can't be invoiced? How are you doing in terms of the length of time it's taking you to get paid? How about the impact of supply chain disruptions and being able to recover some of those increased costs you're facing from owners? And then are you using any kind of financial management solutions? And then at the end, I'll share with you what some of the key takeaways are. And I'll be doing kind of play-by-play as we go through this, and I'll be asking Brian for some input along the way to get Procore's view of this, because he deals with so many contractors all the time. So firstly, the profit margins issue. Just so you know, part of why we like to do this is so that people understand where they fit in the whole industry. It's difficult to know in this big of an industry what other companies who look like you or other companies in your type of work, how they're performing and what they're wrestling with. And so here's what we learned about everybody's profit margins. The average across all 5 of these trades is 21%. But as you can see, an awful lot of people are still working at below that level. And this seems to affect smaller companies at that lowest level of 10% or less of a profit margin. Unfortunately, the average across all the smaller companies, less than between 2 and 10 million, is 20% of them are at that low level. So what is it that tends to erode that profit margin during construction? We ask people to, given all these things, how many of you are finding that this particular thing erodes your profit margin. Only 1% of the people checked none of these and said, oh, we never experienced any profit margin erosion. So if you're experiencing this, it's not just you, okay? It's 99% of the industry. And among everybody else, the average was that you're going to lose about 5% of your profit margin along the way, but 1/3 are saying that they lose 7% or more, right? And these are the culprits here. It's material shortages. We're going to get into some of that and the impact. Finding unforeseen job conditions, okay, that everybody faces that. But the next three are really around this resource constraints, labor availability. You have to pay overtime in order to meet the schedule. And because everybody's so stretched that you got some productivity challenges. A couple of these things are about internal processes. How accurate is your estimating? And how accurate is your labor planning allocation? If it's not accurate, it's going to impact your profit. Problems related to design documents, right? My 20 years in architecture, no set of drawings ever yet has been perfect. Poor reporting between field and office and inefficient procurement are two more, which they're the least on this list, but still 24 and 21%. These are common challenges, internal organizational management challenges that are widely faced. When we look at what some of the biggest differences are between companies of the various sizes that we talk to, you can see the two on the left there tend to be very much more felt by the smaller companies. Okay, they're really getting whacked hard by material shortages, the latest price fluctuations, and the lack of that labor. But interestingly, it's not just small companies suffering more than large. You've got the two on the right here. Although they're generally lower numbers, still it's larger companies much more negatively impacted by having poor project reporting and inefficient procurement, which to me was a little bit of a surprising result, because you tend to think that larger companies kind of have more baked processes and they really got that down. It's not the case, though, very interestingly. So it may actually be more difficult the bigger you are to be effective in those processes. The smaller companies, quite a bit less. So how about rework? In every study we do, rework is such a toxic factor to almost every aspect: schedule, cost control, productivity, you name it. Rework is evil. So we wanted to say, all right, to what degree is unplanned rework affecting your profit margins? And here by trade, you can see it. There's a lot of variety, which again is quite interesting when you do these sorts of studies to see that the concrete folks are actually the least impacted by facing rework. But the steel folks, right, the other structural half of the world, oh my God, they're really seriously impacted, as well as mechanicals and plumbing. So interesting that you see a lot of variety as you move through this. In terms of company sizes, again, since we do find out what size companies are, we try to get an even spread across the various size categories here. You can see, interestingly, again here, it's the larger companies that tend to suffer more from the fact that they're facing rework, which then drives down their profit margins. And those smaller companies, they're just less affected. So when we asked about what are the root causes, right? When you look at why rework is happening, right? It's one thing to identify it as a problem. It's another thing if you can just take a minute and dig back and say, why are we facing this rework? What's driving it? And so we asked about, as you see, all these things, and this matrix is shaded by color so that you can see the darker the shade, the more people responded to that. And from top to bottom is really the order from all the respondents. And so the most frequent cause is poor communication between the contractor and the client. I thought that was quite interesting. And the report itself, if you download it, it digs into that topic a little bit more. It's quite fascinating. And then poor planning and management of the resources, labor, materials, equipment, et cetera, comes in number 2. But there's a variety between the various trades. And then poor communication in the team itself. Again, another kind of a communications-driven issue. Errors by suppliers is really your third party. And then you can see the other ones coming down. If you net out that kind of third-party issue, right, and say, all right, to some degree, you really don't, as a contractor, have a whole lot of control over that. all the rest of these things are actually pretty reasonably within the contractor's control to do something about, right? They are things which can be addressed through process, examining your processes, rethinking your processes, maybe applying technology. You see change management down there, for instance, which is a difficult thing for all companies in this industry to do. And I think this might be a good opportunity to ask Brian for some perspective on what he sees Procore working with so many companies. What are you seeing around the effective methods people are using to implement change management?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's very, very topical for what we do, because so often when folks are bringing in Procore, this is new for them.
Yeah.
And so having to flex these muscles of change management can be difficult. And there's a lot of different ways you could approach, like we could have a whole webinar on just this question, right? Like there's a lot of different things that we can unpack here. And I think that for me, there's always kind of like 5 things, and I'll just kind of bounce through these quickly, but kind of like, and I wouldn't call them steps necessarily, but just 5 things that I think are really important. And a lot of this also goes back to before even being at Procore myself, experiencing this firsthand. Is, one of my responsibilities was to bring in new tech into our organization. And so the first thing that comes to mind is executive sponsorship. And I use that term sponsorship very intentionally, not just executive support, but actual sponsorship. And sponsorship looks very different than just, hey, thumbs up, green light, yeah, this is good, let's go and make this change. That's kind of executive support. Sponsorship in my book is you are actually out as a member of the executive team, clearing a path. You're getting other leaders on board. You're ensuring that resources get put into place. You're making sure that those who have a very important role in implementing this new change, that maybe the scope of their job is slightly changed to allow them the space and capacity to focus on it. And so executive sponsorship, very, very important. Next thing is having that dedicated point person to lead change. And when I talk to customers who have been very successful at implementing and adopting Procore, 100% of the time, they all have a dedicated point person that is leading that change. In my previous company, the CEO referred to me as the tech sheriff, is what he would say. That was his way of having a fun spin on identifying, like, hey, that's the person, and they're in charge, and they've got to make sure that this kind of happens. The next thing, and this sometimes I think is a little bit difficult for us as contractors, because we are very pragmatic in the way we approach things. When we are out building a project, we want to see progress before us. We want to see the walls getting framed up, elevations occurring, roofs getting put in place. But when it comes to implementing change, having a realistic timeline, a realistic schedule, and understanding that sometimes things kind of take some time before you start to see an impact, I think that's really, really important. And sometimes it's hard to do because we're just not used to that, but that's really important. Next thing, I'll just be quick with these last 2, but resources, making sure you have the right resources allocated, time, funds, and of course, your, those that you have dedicated towards implementing change. And then the last one, and this one's kind of my favorite, I call it burning the boats. And this, of course, leads back to, I think, a lot of us are very familiar with of burning the boats and creating this point of no return. So when you are bringing in new change, when you are implementing new change, it's important to get rid of those kind of backdoor ways of doing things. And so that's what I call the burning the boats, creating kind of that point of no return. But yeah, those are kind of like the 5 top things that I would say that I focus on when we talk about change management.
Great, that's excellent perspective. Oftentimes, leading out of rework, you're going to get changes as you can't invoice, and so again, you can see here the large companies are suffering from that really pretty intensely. Do you have some perspective on how you're seeing folks dealing with that?
In terms of, you're talking about in terms of like rework and
And unbilled,
changes. Yeah,
unbilled
yeah,
changes. Yeah.
yeah. So there's a there's a there's a lot of different ways that tech helps across these things. And I think as I think through this, there's kind of three things that really stand out to me. The first one that I think is really important is having a place where there's centralized information for your project. So, for many of us that may not have gone through a digital transformation per se within our organization, we may have documents and specs and daily reports and logs kind of stored all over the place, from network drives to email inboxes. I think in our report here, Steve, it even surfaced that a lot of folks are still using whiteboards as a way
Oh,
to
yeah.
track project information. And so by going through this digital transformation process and using technology to help when it comes to rework and change orders, one big way that you can help alleviate a lot of that pain is by having everything centralized in one location. That's something that tech can help with. Another thing that it can help with, of course, is setting up workflows and automation. So, right now, if you're not using technology for some kind of a construction management process within your organization, there's just a lot of manual processes. There's handwritten notes, there's screenshots, photos taken with your phone and emailed, and then that email needs to get sent out to multiple different people. And so there's all these various different touch points that result in lost time, which turns into missed communication, which can turn into rework because something was done incorrectly, or changes that occurred and that communication didn't get back soon enough in time for your accounting teams to send an invoice for those change orders. So you miss that opportunity. So technology can help shorten that. It can help shorten that window of 2-3 weeks of maybe getting information spun around to a few days, or maybe by the end of the day. And so that's a really important part. And I think what this all kind of boils down to, and you touched on it earlier, is really what this boils down to is if you want to use technology to help avoid rework and to help avoid unbilled change orders, what it really comes down to is just overall improving communication. That was a big thing that came out of this report, was just the gaps in communication, especially from field to office. And that's certainly something that tech can help out with substantially, because it empowers your field to have greater connectivity back to the office. And that's really what, in most cases, what we're really trying to accomplish.
Yep, amen to that. Of course, another issue is just getting paid. The length of time, we wanted to find out, all right, when you send out an invoice, typically how long does it take to get paid? The average across the industry is 48 days. I know everybody always talks about 30, but right now the average is 48, but you can see an awful lot of people out there in this over 90 days even. Are you seeing anything that people are doing in terms of being able to leverage technology to help actually speed up their payments?
Yes, there's a lot that they can do, but what a lot of it falls back to, like we just kind of were talking about, is that importance of communication. And when it comes to getting payments, I know that there's only, especially for trade contractors, there's kind of only so much. There's a lot within this process you don't control. And Steve, you mentioned it a few slides ago, where you said, hey, here's this list of challenges people are facing, and one or two of these things here are really not in your control, but the bulk of them are. And I think similar to this. And so what tech can really do is this going to like force the general contractor or the owner to get billing or to get payments out sooner? Again, there's not a whole lot you can do there, but if you can clean up your internal processes to get your information in order quicker, so you can get invoices cut sooner, there's a lot that can happen there. And so really what it comes down to is timeliness and certainly accuracy. Less double and triple entry, less exposure to human error. When you have tech in place to automate a lot of your workflows and systems, you're able to reduce the time that your team can spend work into an invoice and get it cut off to a GC, and also more accurate. And again, so much of what trade contractors are doing is based off of information they're getting from the field. And if you can make it easier for your foreman or your superintendent, so they're not, on a boom lift on the 9th floor, and if you can help them so they don't have to lower the boom lift, head across the floor, hit the construction elevator, go down the construction elevator, go across the project site, find the project trailer, find an open computer, log in, and send whatever information off. If they can just stay on top of that boom and do it from their phone and shoot it off, like, yeah, that has a big impact on how quickly you can spin the work that's going on in the field into an actual invoice that's cut and sent off. And so, yeah, there's a lot that you can do just to kind of clean up your internal processes for sure.
Which then has all kinds of beneficial ripple effects in productivity and everything else. So when we did ask folks what they think are the best ways that they could accelerate, number one came out as either better software or technology that somehow helps automate that process, and then also better contracts and legal protections. So everybody's dealing with supply chain disruptions, right? And oftentimes those are generating costs, which ideally you'd like to be able to put back to the owner, but we wanted to find out how often are you not able to do that? And it was really very high numbers here, especially in steel. They're just not successful at passing on those costs. So no surprise that their profit margins are so hammered by that. This is endemic across all of these trades, but the steel and the plumbing really seem to have it the worst. When we do it by company size, again, I was kind of expecting the smaller companies might be having a more difficult time doing this. No, in fact, it's the larger companies that are having a more difficult time passing that on to owners. I don't really have a good answer for that, but it's definitely a very clear kind of a trend difference. So then we asked also, okay, so you've got these all kinds of disruptions around shipping and trucking and supply chains. What are you doing about it, right? And so here's what people said by trade. And again, these are shaded so that the darker the shade of blue is, the more folks said that, yeah, I'm doing that, broken down across the various trades in the columns. And at the far right is what everybody says, and so it goes top down. But you know, raising the prices to cover possible problems just seems to be everybody's number one go-to choice. Electricals fewer than concretes, quite a bit more, and then suggesting more alternative products, increasing the numbers of their suppliers. That was especially high in concrete, interestingly, and then interestingly lower in mechanical and electrical. Increasing the amount of inventory they actually hold on hand. That scored relatively strongly. Some people are actually looking at buying directly from manufacturers now instead of going through distributors. And then lastly, turning down work, which is the responsible thing to do, right? But it really doesn't help anybody's business, nor does it help the industry if you can't get people to do work because they can't get the materials. That was less so with concrete, but remarkably strong with steel. And as you look down the column, the steel folks are the ones who are probably the strongest across, on average, across all of these. So to what degree are folks using any kind of financial management software solution, right, to back of house to run this thing? The most frequent method are the commercially available tools, but to your point, an awful lot of people are still using whiteboards, doing stuff on paper, just trying to get it done the old-fashioned way. And there's still a very wide use of spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are fine; they do great things. But there are better ways. I was talking to somebody last week who told me that their company, they have so much stuff loaded into a spreadsheet for financial management, it takes 35 minutes in the morning to open it up. They call that their Excel coffee tech break, right? There are better ways, Oh, boy. And so the percentage that use some kind of software to conduct financial management by trade, you can see, interestingly, concrete folks are the most advanced and the mechanical are the least advanced. And so, these are moving targets. This stuff changes every day. And that's why it's fun to do this research so we can take a snapshot right now and see where we stand, come back in a year or two and see what's changed, who's doing things differently, and how things are moving in a different direction. So the key takeaways I'd like people to think of from all of this, and please, here's the URL, go get this full report because it's got a ton of really interesting detail and information in it that we learned, but that you're not alone if you're suffering with margin erosion. Everybody, 99% are dealing with that, right? So it's not just you. And in terms of unplanned rework, you have to be looking at your processes. Now, to Brian's point, change management's not easy. You need real engagement at senior level, and you need a champion, you need a sheriff to drive any kind of change management stuff. But this whole idea of poor resource management is killing people, right? The unbillable change orders represent major lost revenue, especially for the bigger companies, right? About a third of payments are 60 days late. There's ways to make that better. Some of them are process, some of them are technology, some of them are communication. But at the end of the day, that is going to really help you a lot in terms of cash flow. These supply chain disruptions, there are interesting ways now to try and deal with that, but everybody's facing that. And overall, I think that there are good technology solutions that can improve profitability across the board if you can have a good process for putting them in. You know, Brian, again, you guys deal with so many contractors at various stages of their own digital transformation, or digital maturity, addressing specific issues or trying to do larger kind of platform plays. What are some of the bigger trends that you're seeing in terms of how people are going about this that are successful so that you can help other folks to get there quicker?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's interesting for me because as I kind of look at just the macro trends that have occurred within technology usage across construction over the last few years. And I think back like maybe 5-6 years ago, really kind of like pre-COVID. I think COVID kind of sped things up a bit, but there was still a bit of a kind of widespread aversion to technology within construction. And you know, there's still a lot of attitudes of hey, we've always done it a certain way, it's worked for us, we're not really looking for or feel like we need anything new. And things are different now. What I tend to see now is a lot more people are saying, you know, we actually do feel like we need tech. We do feel like we need something. We need some real creative solutions. We don't really know where to begin. And so typically where people are kind of starting this is usually they're really just kind of focused on making sure that the simple things and kind of the daily things are covered. So, you know, what do I need to do to make sure things like submittals and RFIs and schedules and daily logs and, you know, kind of those basic things, how do I just make sure that we get those to a point where they're accurate, where there's better visibility, where things are more centralized, documents, drawings, like how do I get all my drawings out of 8 different folders on the network drive to where there's like one centralized location where everybody can go for the one single source of truth. And so right now, that's what we see a lot of is people just saying, I just need my basic construction management activities at a point where it's reliable, accurate, and centralized. And that's where we're seeing a lot of these conversations starting right now. There's also a lot of buzz around like AI and machine learning, and I think that's just kind of where the trends are right now in terms of buzzworthy things. But just getting the simple things done right now is still where the big focus is, where I think it should be, honestly, for a lot of companies. So.
Yeah, that's good advice. So, Sarah, have any questions come in on the chat?
We have not had anybody be bold enough to type one in, but I know you may have one or two still cooking for Brian. So if you want to dive into one of those, maybe someone will be bold enough to share one with us.
Sure. If you were going to try and identify, as you've already said, it's really the simple stuff that's probably needing to be done first. If you had to pick sort of the 3 most common challenges that people are addressing now with technology and finding some success, you know, what are the big ones that Because again, oftentimes people think I'm the only one suffering from this. It's because I don't know how to do this and it's too hard. No, you and a million other companies are suffering with this too. You know, what are sort of the big ones that can be relatively easily addressed and are going to have the highest chance of success?
Yeah, so the big ones,
By big, I don't mean in terms of magnitude, but just the commonality of it, just the frequency that you can almost predict going in with someone that they're probably not
yeah.
optimal on something.
Yeah, so one of the common things that I'm seeing more and more of that I'm really excited about, because I think it's a really smart play. And again, going back, 5-6 years ago, like there's a lot of talk, right? It's like every conference, every event, every conversation I have with somebody about the state of the construction industry, labor shortage is bound to come up. It came up in this report. In fact, there's a whole, I know we didn't really address it on this one because we were talking about profitability issues, but there's a lot of there's a big wave of retirees that are coming, and that was surfaced in this report. And so this labor shortage is a big challenge, and it's not new, but I think what is kind of new is all of us looking around going, oh boy, this probably isn't going to change.
Yeah, right. We can't make new people fast enough.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're all looking around going, this wasn't a trend. Like this is our new normal. And so when you look at how we address that, there's kind of two big levers that you can pull. One is, well, let's get younger folks into the industry. Let's get young people excited and energized and interested in coming and working in construction. The other big lever that you can pull is if you look at things and go, well, if we get new people in, great, but we'll probably never completely backfill the whole funnel. So the other lever is we need to make people more efficient. We need to get the same or more done with the same people. And technology fills a really important role with both of those two things. And I'm seeing a lot of people when they come into Procore saying, look, I need to help address this labor issue. For one, if you think of younger people coming into an organization and they look around and they see things being done as they were done 10, 15 years ago, it's a bit of a head scratcher for them, right? Yeah, they're like, this is cool. I like what you're doing with these projects and everything, but I don't know. I don't know if this is the right place for me. So technology helps attract talent, especially the younger talent. The other side of things, the efficiency side of things, I see this all the time, and this is a big thing that people try to solve. I have clients and customers that I talk to, and they say, look, before Procore, my project manager could maybe handle, and every trade's different on this, but my project manager could handle $5 million worth of projects. Mm-hmm. Now with Procore, they're able to handle $7, $8, $9 million worth of projects. And so, and this is not meant to be an ad for Procore necessarily, but what I'm saying is that the role of technology in terms of profitability and in terms of what we're seeing people trying to solve for, we need to solve this labor issue. I need to attract people, and I need to make my people more efficient with their time, and technology fills a big role to solving both of those things on a very important topic that we can't talk about too much, this labor shortage. We got to figure this out.
Yeah, good. All right, well, Sarah, I think if there's no other questions, then I'll hand it back to you.
Great, and I want to thank you both so much for taking the time. This was very informative, and I'm sure our audience is thinking the same. I would also like to thank everybody for attending today. This webinar is part of our series on key trends for specialty trade contractors, so please keep an eye out for info on future webinars in this series. And thank you all again, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.